Just 1 minute ago, a blast from Mount Canlaon in the Philippines hurled darkness over Negros Island, sending ash thousands of feet into the sky and millions scrambling for safety. The sky turned black as surging pyroclastic flows raced toward sleeping farms and cities, plunging the region into chaos. Authorities raised the alert, but no one saw this eruption coming, despite warning signs. Why do so many people stay beneath this restless volcano, and what could happen next? Negros Island stretches across the heart of the central Philippines, its spine dominated by the brooding presence of Mount Canlaon. At 2,465 meters, Canlaon is the tallest peak in the Visayas, rising abruptly from the patchwork of sugarcane fields and dense forests that blanket the land below. Just 18.5 miles separate the summit from Bacolod City, a distance that feels much shorter when the mountain stirs. Millions live within sight of its slopes, their lives shaped by the rhythms of a volcano that both nourishes and threatens. The Philippines sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone notorious for earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Of the country's 24 active volcanoes, Canlaon's reputation is both ancient and unfinished. Its eruptions have left layers of ash in the soil, making the region one of the country's most fertile. Farmers depend on this land, returning season after season, even as the volcano reminds them of its power. The soil's richness is a gift, but it comes with the constant risk of disaster. For generations, communities here have told stories about the volcano's spirit. In local tradition, Canlaon is not just a mountain, but a living force, sometimes called Leon, the Ancient One, or imagined as a powerful queen who watches over the island. Some elders speak of the volcano as a protector, bringing rain and good harvests. Others warn of its anger, describing how eruptions are signs that the mountain's patience has worn thin. These stories are woven into everyday life, shaping how people respond when the ground trembles or the sky darkens with ash. Annual rituals and offerings continue on the slopes and in nearby towns, reflecting a deep respect for the mountain's dual nature. During times of calm, residents give thanks for the bounty the volcano provides. When Canlaon rumbles, prayers and ceremonies take on a more urgent tone, asking for mercy and protection. This relationship is not just about fear or reverence, it's about survival, adaptation, and the acceptance that life here means living with uncertainty. Despite the threat, few leave. The land is more than property. It is heritage, memory, and livelihood. Families pass down fields and stories together, teaching the next generation how to read the mountain's moods and prepare for its outbursts. Scientific teams now monitor Canlaon around the clock, tracking every tremor and gas emission. But for many here, the old wisdom still matters. The volcano is both a warning and a promise, a force that shapes not only the landscape but the spirit of those who call this place home. Pressure inside Mount Canlaon had been building for years, but the signs of unrest grew impossible to ignore in the weeks before the eruption. Since 2022, scientists at PHIVOLCS tracked steady inflation of the volcano's flanks, subtle but measurable swelling that hinted at magma forcing its way upward. Instruments anchored to the bedrock recorded the ground shifting millimeter by millimeter, day after day, as the mountain quietly loaded energy beneath its surface. In mid-October, the tension escalated. On October 16th, seismic stations picked up a swarm of 90 volcanic earthquakes in a single day, far above the usual background rumble. These were not the deep, distant quakes that sometimes pass unnoticed, but shallow tremors clustered around the summit, exactly the kind that often precede an eruption. Each quake was a warning, like a drumbeat growing louder, echoing through the monitoring rooms and setting off internal alerts. 5 volcanologists, working around the clock, watched the data streams for any sign that the mountain's restlessness might turn dangerous. The warnings didn't stop there. In the early morning hours of October 23rd, 2 distinct ash puffs burst from the crater. These emissions, captured by thermal cameras and confirmed by field observers, sent brief columns of gray ash several hundred meters into the air. While not large enough to threaten nearby towns, they signaled that gas and pressure were finding new pathways to the surface. For those who know volcanoes, such minor outbursts are rarely random. They are the volcano's way of venting frustration, a sign that the system is under stress. PHIVOLCS responded by intensifying surveillance. Gas analyzers measured sulfur dioxide levels, which, curiously, remained much lower than normal, only 189 tons per day on October 24th, compared to monthly averages nearing 1,700 tons. This drop suggested that gas was being trapped below, increasing the risk of a sudden, explosive release. Meanwhile, deformation sensors continued to report persistent inflation. The mountain was swelling, not deflating, a classic precursor for a pressurized, gas-driven eruption. Throughout this period, daily bulletins from PHIVOLCS urged caution. The volcano remained at alert level 2, meaning moderate unrest, but the language grew sharper. Entry within the 2.5-mile permanent danger zone was strictly forbidden. Aircraft were warned to avoid the airspace above the summit. Local disaster councils received updated advisories, and community leaders were briefed on the latest readings. The message was clear. Canlaon was not asleep. It was warning everyone who would listen. For residents, these alerts triggered a familiar unease. Some remembered the December 2024 eruption when similar warning signs had preceded disaster. Others checked their radios, scanned the horizon, or called relatives living closer to the slopes. The science was precise, the data unmistakable, but the question remained. Would the next tremor or ash puff be the one that changed everything? As dusk fell on October 24th, the mountain's warnings hung heavy in the air, and the region braced for what might come next. At exactly 8:05 p.m., the pressure inside Mount Canlaon reached its breaking point. Seismic stations picked up a sudden, powerful tremor, a jolt that signaled the volcano's core had fractured. In the next few seconds, a shock wave burst from the summit, strong enough to register 204 pascals on infrasound sensors 5 kilometers away. Residents within a 6-kilometer radius heard the blast as a deep, rolling boom. Above the crater, thermal cameras captured a flash of incandescent light, the first sign of magma and gas breaking free. Within moments, a dense column of ash and glowing debris shot skyward, rising 2,000 meters into the night. Ballistic fragments, chunks of rock blasted by the force of the explosion, were hurled hundreds of meters from the vent, visible in eyewitness videos as fiery arcs against the darkness. By 8:05 and 18 seconds, the lower Masulog CCTV feed recorded the ash plume's rapid ascent. Less than 20 seconds later, reports from Bacolod City described the first light dusting of ash falling from the sky. The eruption's energy was not spent. At 8:06, thermal sensors confirmed the onset of pyroclastic density currents, superheated clouds of gas, ash, and rock, spilling over the southern rim. Racing down the slopes at speeds that can reach 100 kilometers per hour, these flows glowed with trapped heat, their path traced by both cameras and ground monitors. The PDCs ran out for nearly a kilometer, contained by the upper slopes, but threatening anyone within the hazard zone. For 3 minutes, the volcano's summit glowed red and white, the ash column billowing upward and drifting northwest. Satellite data and aviation advisories confirmed the plume's direction, warning pilots to avoid the airspace above Negros. By 8:08, the eruption's incandescent core faded, replaced by a thick, gray cloud that continued to rise and drift. Ash began settling on barangays to the west, Milam, Ma'ao, Ilian, coating fields, roads, and rooftops. The sulfurous odor spread quickly, carried on the wind into La Carlota and Pontevedra. Even as the main eruption pulse faded, seismic instruments logged at least 21 aftershocks in the hours that followed, a sign that the volcano was not yet at rest. The entire sequence, from the first seismic spike to the dying ash plume, lasted barely 3 minutes. Yet in those moments, Canlaon unleashed enough energy to darken the sky, disrupt air travel, and send deadly flows racing toward nearby communities. For those living on the slopes, each second mattered. The eruption's timeline was not just a record of natural violence, but a countdown, one that determined who would have time to escape and who would not. As the eruption's shockwave rolled across As Negros, local disaster teams moved with practiced speed. Within minutes, public address systems echoed through the barangays, repeating a single urgent message: stay indoors, seal windows and doors, and keep clear of the 2.5-mile permanent danger zone. The alert had been drilled into memory. No one needed a reminder of what could happen to those who lingered too close to the slopes. At the command center, officials tracked updates from PHIVOLCS and relayed instructions to field teams. Rescue vehicles, already staged at key junctions, fanned out toward the boundaries of the exclusion zone. Roadblocks went up along all major routes leading toward the volcano. Officers checked lists of at-risk households, focusing on those closest to the southern flanks where pyroclastic flows had been detected. The goal was clear: prevent anyone from entering the hazard area and help those already inside to reach safety if conditions worsened. Community leaders coordinated by radio, confirming head counts and reporting ashfall intensity. In several villages, barangay captains moved door to door, urging residents to put on face masks or cover their mouths with wet cloths. For families living just outside the exclusion line, the warning was direct: prepare to evacuate if the situation escalated. Volunteers distributed emergency supplies, masks, water, and plastic sheeting to block ash from blowing indoors. Schools and churches outside the danger zone opened as temporary shelters, their lights flickering as lines of people arrived seeking refuge from the choking air. Official advisories repeated the same instructions: do not attempt to cross into restricted areas. Avoid all river valleys and low-lying paths where ash and debris could collect, and keep tuned to local radio for updates. Air traffic was rerouted well clear of the summit, with pilots instructed to avoid the growing ash cloud. Behind the scenes, coordination between local government and national agencies ran on established protocols. Disaster response teams logged every call, tracked the movement of rescue vehicles, and updated hazard maps as new reports came in. Their actions were deliberate, shaped by lessons from past eruptions and the knowledge that even a few minutes' delay could cost lives. In the face of darkness and falling ash, preparedness became the difference between chaos and control. Celia Reyes has spent her entire life among the sugarcane fields that stretch from the foot of Mount Canlaon to the horizon. Like thousands of others in Negros, her family's survival depends on the harvest. Every planting season, they bet everything on the land's promise, a promise made richer and riskier by the volcano looming above. When ash began to fall after the eruption, Celia and her children rushed outside to cover the cane with tarps and drag their goats under shelter. The work was frantic but necessary. Volcanic ash doesn't just dust the leaves, it burns them, blocks sunlight, and saps the crop's strength. In a single night, months of labor can be undone. She remembers last December, when an even larger eruption forced her neighbors to flee and left a thick gray blanket over the fields. That year, her family lost nearly a third of their cane crop. Cleaning took days, and the plants that survived grew weak and stunted. The co-op paid less for damaged cane, and the bills kept coming. Still, she stayed. As Celia puts it, we stay because land is life, volcano or not. This year, the cycle repeats. Ash from the latest eruption clings to every surface, on the cane, in the irrigation ditches, and even inside the house. Each morning, Celia sweeps the floors and shakes out the laundry, but the real worry is outside. If the ash is thick enough, It will choke the young shoots and poison the water. Even a light layer can mean lower yields and lost income for months. Some urge her to leave, but for Celia and many others, leaving would mean abandoning not just a job, but a history. The land is inheritance, memory, and hope, passed down through generations, despite the danger. For families like hers, the volcano is both a threat and a provider. The risk is constant, but so is the need to endure. The fields will be tended, the harvest will go on, and the people will stay watching the mountain for signs of what comes next. In December 2024, Mount Canlaon delivered its most punishing lesson in living memory. That eruption lasted less than 4 minutes, but in that brief window, the mountain forced 87,000 people to evacuate their homes. The ash column soared 4,000 meters into the sky, blotting out the sun and drifting across Negros, Panay, and even parts of Cebu. For families caught in the path of the fallout, the world shrank to a haze of gray, fields, rooftops, and roads buried under a thick, choking layer of ash. The scale of the disaster pushed local and national response systems to their limits. Traffic jams stretched for kilometers as residents tried to escape, many abandoning vehicles when the roads became impassable. Evacuation centers overflowed within hours, forcing thousands to spend the night in schools, churches, and makeshift camps. Some families slept in parked cars or huddled under tarps beside the highway, waiting for news about when, or if, they could return home. Authorities struggled to keep up. Communications broke down in several barangays, and the lack of enough pre-designated shelters left many scrambling for safe ground. Aid distribution lagged behind need, and confusion over exclusion zones led to tense standoffs between officials and residents desperate to protect livestock or salvage belongings. The aftermath revealed hard truths. Ashfall ruined crops, contaminated water supplies, and left entire communities facing months of cleanup. But the disaster also forced a reckoning. In the months that followed, protocols were rewritten. Rescue vehicles were pre-staged. Shelter inventories were expanded. Disaster drills became more frequent. And new communication channels linked barangay leaders directly to provincial command centers. The December eruption stands as a benchmark, a reminder of how quickly a volcano can upend life and how much preparation matters when every minute counts. For Negros, the lessons of 2024 are written in the memory of those who ran through darkness, carrying children and hope, with ash still falling from the sky. At 8:05 p.m. on October 24, 2025, Mount Canlaon sent a 2,000-meter ash plume high above Negros Island, forcing authorities to maintain a 2.5-mile danger zone and mobilize rescue teams throughout the region. This eruption followed days of warning signs, ash emissions, seismic swarms, and ground inflation, carefully tracked by PHIVOLCS monitors. Farmers like Celia Reyes faced immediate livelihood loss as ash blanketed sugarcane fields, echoing the December 2024 disaster that displaced 87,000 people. While experts can measure magma movement and issue alerts, precise eruption timing remains unpredictable. Some data on ground deformation and gas emissions are still being analyzed, and the full impact on agriculture will unfold in the weeks ahead. With 24 active volcanoes in the Philippines, the lessons from Canlaon are clear. Vigilance, science, and community readiness remain the strongest defenses against sudden natural events. For now, the mountain remains restless, and the people of Negros watch and prepare, guided by evidence and experience.